How to make a human brain model using macaroni and spaghetti. Here I present object materials I used to create my human brain model. I used a pencil, a white craft glue, a rubber to erase where there was mistakes, a highlighters, macaroni and spaghetti. I applied all these presented materials on a flat plain brown box. Here are the steps I took to create my human brain model. I first drew the human brain single hemisphere on a flat plain brown box with a pencil in order to navigate where I'll be placing macaroni in a structured form. Secondly, I divided the brain hemisphere into 4 loops, structuring macaroni on top of the glue to ensure stability. I finally chopped spaghetti to place it each inside loop at the top of the glue before applying colors to identify different parts of the brain. I learned that a brain consists of 4 loops in each hemisphere. At the bottom of the optical loop, there is what we call a cerebellum. Here I represent a cerebellum, critical in coordination of movement and sense of balance. A role is organizing a sensory information that guide movement for learning and memory. At the top of cerebellum, there is an optical loop. This is where optical loop located at the back of the head, where most visual signals are sent and visual processing begins, called the primary visual cortex at the back of the head. At the back of the optical loop, there is what we call a parietal loop. This is a parietal loop at the back of the optical loop. At the top of the optical loop, register the sense of touch called the primary semantosseous cortex and receives signals from various parts of the body. Also involves in integrating visual input and monitoring the body's position in space. On the left-hand side of the brain, a temporary loop, which contains an area for auditory processing called a primary auditory cortex. What I learned in my process of creating a human brain model is that a damage to the left temporal loop can impair comprehension of speech and language. Okay, at the top of the temporal loop, this is what we call a frontal loop. Located at the top of the temporal loop, controls movement and muscles, called the primary motor cortex. We also have a prefrontal cortex. Portion of the motor cortex contributes to variety of higher order functions, working memory, reasoning, decision making, organize, integrate, and direct thoughts processes. These are the 4 loops in each hemisphere. What I noticed about the brain is that there is a link between a behavior and the brain. A behavioral functions, it is controlled by the brain, which basically means a brain transmit, receive, and interpret all the stimulus. I also learned that a brain consists of 2 hemispheres, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. Therefore, each hemisphere has specialized ability and contributes towards our behavior and experiences. By the way, the left hemisphere regarded as the dominant hemisphere because it processes language, and the right hemisphere functions with puzzling, assembling, copying, drawings, discriminating colors, arranging blocks. I individually practiced and learned how brain work by presenting a verbal stimuli object to the right visual field. I identified stimuli quickly and more accurate compared to the left visual field. Automatically, a right hemisphere is quicker with visual special tasks such as recognizing faces. Both hemispheres, what I learned is that they are specialized to handle a certain types of cognitive task better than the other. Finally, a left hemisphere verbally processing language, speech, reading, and writing. A right hemisphere non-verbally processing visual, spatial, and musical tasks, perception of emotions. A hemisphere specialization creates the capacity of the brain. Therefore, the brain is a complex organ that controls thoughts, memory, emotions, touch, motor skills, vision, breathing, temperature, hunger, and every process that regulates our body. The brain itself, it is not a muscle. It contains blood vessels, nerves, including neurons and glial cells. The brain sends and receives chemicals and electrical signals throughout the body. Different signals control different processes, and my brain interprets each. This is what I learned about the brain. However, there are some structures within the brain, including a hypothalamus. It regulates body temperature, synchronizes sleep patterns, controls hunger, thirst, and also play a role in some aspects of memory and emotions. We also have amygdala. An amygdala is located under each half of the brain, included in the limbic system. It regulates emotions and memory and associated with the brain reward system, stress and fight or flight response when someone perceives a threat. I typically learned about a hippocampus in my human brain model creation. It's a curved seahorse-shaped organ on the other side of each temporal lobe. The hippocampus is the part of the large structure called hippocampus formation. It supports memory, learning, navigation, and perception of space. Here I share a little story involving my brain. When I was young, I was involved in a car accident. Unfortunately, I had a head injury. Then, that is where I gained a knowledge about my brain, that the relation between a brain activity and a behavior requires a special research methods, tools. I was so scared that my brain somehow in future could be injured. But then, now I learned that the brain is protected by the skull set and meninges, a durameter outer layer close to the skull, arachnoid membrane, a middle layer, and we also have a pyometer, inner layer close to the cerebral cortex. Also learned that a brain is covered with a cerebrospinal neurons, a hollow cavities in the brain filled with cerebrospinal flat ventricles protecting the brain. This is what I learned from my creation of a human brain model.